Verses 6 to 15. The beginning of this paragraph is only a repetition of what account we had before of the people's good character during the government of Joshua, and of his death and burial, Jos 24:29, 30, which comes in here again only to make way for the following account, which this chapter gives, of their degeneracy and apostasy. The angel had foretold that the Canaanites and their idols would be a snare to Israel. Now the historian undertakes to show that they were so, and, that this may appear the more clear, he looks back a little, and takes notice of their happy settlement in the land of Canaan. Joshua, having distributed this land among them, dismissed them to the quiet and comfortable possession of it. v6 He sent them away, not only every tribe, but every man to his inheritance, no doubt giving them his blessing of their continuance in the faith and fear of God's holy name as long as Joshua lived. v7 As they went to their possessions with good resolutions to cleave to God, so they persisted for some time in these good resolutions, as long as they had good rulers that set them good examples, gave them good instructions, and reproved and restrained the corruptions that crept in among them, and as long as they had fresh in remembrance the great things God did for them when He brought them into Canaan. Those that had seen these wonders had so much sense as to believe their own eyes, and so much reason as to serve that God who had appeared so gloriously on their behalf. But those that followed, because they had not seen, believed not. Of the death and burial of Joshua, which gave a fatal stroke to the interests of religion among the people, v8, 9. Yet so much sense they had of their obligations to him that they did him honor at his death, and buried him in Timnath-Heres, so it is called here, not, as in Joshua, Timnath-Serah. Heres signifies the sun, a representation of which, some think, was set upon his sepulchre, and gave name to it, in remembrance of the sun standing still at his word. So divers of the Jewish writers say, but I much question whether an image of the sun would be allowed to the honor of Joshua at that time, when, by reason of men's general proneness to worship the sun, it would be in danger of being abused to the dishonor of God. Of the rising of a new generation, v10. All that generation in a few years wore off, their good instructions and examples died and were buried with them, and there arose another generation of Israelites who had so little sense of religion, and were in so little care about it, that, notwithstanding all the advantages of their education, one might truly say that they knew not the Lord, knew Him not aright, knew Him not as He had revealed Himself, else they would not have forsaken Him. They were so entirely devoted to the world, so intent upon the business of it, or so indulgent of the flesh in ease and luxury, that they never minded the true God and His holy religion, and so were easily drawn aside to false gods and their abominable superstitions. And so he comes to give us a general idea of the series of things in Israel during the time of the judges, the same repeated in the same order. The people of Israel forsook the God of Israel, and gave that worship and honor to the dunghill deities of the Canaanites which was due to him alone. Be astonished, O heavens! At this, and wonder, O earth! Hath a nation, such a nation, so well fed, so well taught, changed its God, such a God of infinite power, unspotted purity, inexhaustible goodness, and so very jealous of a competitor, for stocks and stones that could do neither good nor evil? Never was there such an instance of folly, ingratitude, and perfidiousness. Observe how it is described here, v11:13. In general, they did evil, nothing could be more evil, that is, more provoking to God, nor more prejudicial to themselves, and it was in the sight of the Lord. All evil is before Him, but He takes special notice of the sin of having any other God. In particular, they forsook the Lord. This was one of the two great evils they were guilty of. They had been joined to the Lord in covenant, but now they forsook Him, as a wife treacherously departs from her husband. They forsook the worship of the Lord, so the Chaldee, for those that forsake the worship of God do in effect forsake God Himself. It aggravated this that He was the God of their fathers, so that they were born in His house, and therefore bound to serve Him, and that He brought them out of the land of Egypt. He loosed their bonds, and upon that account also they were obliged to serve Him. When they forsook the only true God, they did not turn atheists, nor were they such fools as to say, there is no God, but they followed other gods, so much remained of pure nature as to own a god, yet so much appeared of corrupt nature as to multiply gods, and take up with any, and to follow the fashion, not the rule, in religious worship. Israel had the honor of being a peculiar people and dignified above all others, and yet so false were they to their own privileges that they were fond of the gods of the people that were round about them. Baal and Ashtaroth, he gods and she gods, they made their court to sun and moon, Jupiter and Juno. Baalim signifies lords, and Ashtaroth blessed ones, both plural, for when they forsook Jehovah, who is one, they had gods many and lords many, as a luxuriant fancy pleased to multiply them. Whatever they took for their gods, they served them and bowed down to them, gave honor to them and begged favors from them. The God of Israel was hereby provoked to anger, and delivered them up into the hand of their enemies. v. 14:15. He was wroth with them, for he is a jealous God and true to the honor of his own name, and the way he took to punish them for their apostasy was to make those their tormentors whom they yielded to as their tempters. They made themselves as mean and miserable by forsaking God as they would have been great and happy if they had continued faithful to him. The scale of victory turned against them. After they forsook God, whenever they took the sword in hand they were as sure to be beaten as before they had been sure to conquer. Formerly their enemies could not stand before them, but, wherever they went, the hand of the Lord was for them. When they began to cool in their religion, God suspended his favor, stopped the progress of their successes, and would not drive out their enemies any more. v. 3, only suffered them to keep their ground, but now, when they had quite revolted to idolatry, the war turned directly against them, and they could not any longer stand before their enemies. God would rather give the success to those that had never known nor owned him than to those that had done both, but had now deserted him. Wherever they went, they might perceive that God himself had turned to be their enemy, and fought against them. The balance of power then turned against them, of course. Whoever would might spoil them, whoever would might oppress them. God sold them into the hands of their enemies. Not only he delivered them up freely, as we do that which we have sold, but he did it upon a valuable consideration, that he might get himself honor as a jealous God, who would not spare even his own peculiar people when they provoked him. He sold them as insolvent debtors are sold, Mt 18:25, by their sufferings to make some sort of reparation to his glory for the injury it sustained by their apostasy. Observe how their punishment answered what they had done. They served the gods of the nations that were round about them, even the meanest, and God made them serve the princes of the nations that were round about them, even the meanest. He that is company for every fool is justly made a fool of by every company. How it answered what God has spoken. The hand of heaven was thus turned against them, as the Lord had said, and as the Lord had sworn, v. 15, referring to the curse and death set before them in the covenant, with the blessing and life. Those that have found God true to his promises may thence infer that he will be as true to his threatenings.